Hello, you are tuning in to the Capsule in Conversation podcast, dedicated to women and their well-being. I'm Natalie Anderson, and today I'm joined by broadcaster and beauty editor Emma Guns to talk the future of beauty, the end of wellness, and leaning into authenticity. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join us in our conversation. Hello all, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've all had a great week. It is my great pleasure to welcome my special guest today, as for the last 20 years, she has been one of the most trusted voices in health and beauty. For a decade, she notably held the role of OK Magazine's resident beauty editor, has written for Red, Stylist, The Telegraph, and one of my personal favourites, Zest magazine, and has acted as a consultant for numerous global beauty brands. However, in more recent years, it's her hugely successful podcast, The Emma Guns Show, that has cemented her status as an authority in the beauty and well-being arena, amassing over 15 million global downloads and welcoming guests including Sarah Jessica Parker, Dax Shepard and Caroline Hirons. She is at the forefront of cutting through the beauty BS, candidly discussing products, trends and her own personal journey with the ever-changing standards in beauty. It's my great pleasure to welcome her today. It's the brilliant Emma Guns. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's so glorious to be on the receiving end of such a wonderful introduction. Normally, I'm the one who's effusively sort of gassing somebody up. It's quite nice to be gassed up. Thank you. I love that.
No, good. I'm glad. Well, this is it. Because and also when you're a podcaster interviewing another podcaster, you're a bit like, oh. You know, you get a little bit of the nerves. And as I was researching you, though, there were several words to me that kept popping up, which I think we'll delve into a little later. But there were things like resilience, honesty and acceptance. And I know you've been you've been on quite a journey. But if we go back to the very, very beginning, I'd just love to know where your interest in beauty started. Was it like a film, a product, a person?
I think it was sort of a two-pronged thing, if you like. So I did not navigate my teenage years with grace or ease. I did not blossom like a swan. I kind of had a very similar puberty to boys, and I just sort of got wider, spottier and hairier, which isn't really the journey that a young lady in the making wants to navigate. And so for me, I clung to beauty pages of magazines because I had concerns and issues that perhaps my peers didn't, but they were spoken about in the pages of titles that were pitched at people who were a lot older than I was. And there was something very alluring and very enticing about it. And equally, I thought, well, if I use all of these things, then maybe I'll be like the other girls. So there was that side of things. And then I also think, when I was growing up, a lot of the kind of really dynamic, incredible women in film were somehow connected to the media in some way. I mean, even Lois Lane's a great example. Lois Lane was a journalist who then went out with Superman and Clark Kent. But I mean, and I thought, well, that's what a powerful, dynamic woman does. A powerful, dynamic woman breaks stories and is in the media and is connected and works at a newspaper or a magazine. And that just kept getting confirmed with all of the films that you can think. You think about all of the films that we
definitely
love. Like even, I know I was already at magazines at this point, but I think How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days made working on a magazine look so glamorous. And 13 Going on 30, she was a magazine editor. And so I think that landscape was always depicted in television programs, even something much less sort of glamorous and shiny, if you like Press Gang when I was growing up.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my absolute favourites, and I loved that show. And again, it was about student newspaper, wasn't it? And I remember when we interviewed, when I sat down with Jo Elvin, she said a similar thing. She said, well, I lived kind of out in the back streets of Sydney, wherever she was, and she said, and it was the way that you've met pop stars. She was like, so somebody that was quite androgynous like me, that wanted to be a bit more glamorous, you know, that's kind of what you read magazines, and that's how you met your pop star idols. So it's a similar kind of thing.
Totally. And I remember even watching The Big Breakfast, for people who are listening in the UK who perhaps remember The Big Breakfast, which is one of the greatest breakfast television shows of all time. And they used to have the news on at like 10 to the hour. And at the end of that news section, they would have the showbiz element. And I just wanted to reach through the television and be at the Elle Style Awards or be at the MTV Music Awards. And I just thought that that world looked looked really safe and fun and where I should be. So I was like, well, let's go there then. And actually, if like realistically, I don't think I ever plotted a path that deliberately. But there were some happy accidents along the way, and I did find myself at the Elle Style Awards and the MTV Music Awards, weirdly.
But this is the thing, it's like, as well, because we grew up in the same era, and it pop culture then, you know, it wasn't as easily accessible as it was kind of through social media. We didn't have that. It was television, it was magazines. That for us was our way into this kind of glamorous lifestyle, into, you know, like you said, you know, actually getting to go onto a red carpet. The only way you could do that was work your way up, which you did. You know, you did do all of that, and you kind of managed to establish yourself as a writer. And then if we fast forward, ended up being, you know, I remember you being OK Magazine's beauty editor, because those were the days when it was like OK was like the celebrity weddings, the big massive interviews, the front pages. And how was that for you as a time, really? Because would it have been like the 2000s, that would have been when again pop culture was still away from social media?
Yeah, so my tenure at OK Magazine was 31st of March 2003 to June 2012. So it was very much the noughties, which is why the whole the resurgence of like the Beckham documentary and the Robbie Williams documentary and all of this nostalgia, like S Club are on tour at the moment. I'm finding it sort of comforting and weird and sort of, oh gosh, look at how much time has gone, because that really was my era. And it was amazing, but you're right, there was a distance. Now when I think about sort of how the landscape was then, it just wouldn't exist today. And I guess I was actually chatting to another magazine editor. She had worked on Glamour for a long time, and we had pretty much the same sort of era. And we were saying how, God, we're so lucky. We are so lucky that we got to be on magazines at that time. I'm sure each era, it's all been wonderful. But when I look back, I think, wow, that was really amazing, because some really stuff that hadn't ever happened before was happening. Like reality TV was happening, and we were sort of riding that wave, and X Factor and Pop Stars The Rivals, all of those sorts of things, which are so new and exciting. We kind of got to be, especially as a fan, which is what I ultimately am, and a consumer of this content, I got to be up close and personal to all of these incredible things that were really blooming. So I feel very, very privileged to have had that experience.
And as well, like I was saying to my husband the other day, those things had a staying power, a value. Like everything at the minute feels so saturated that nothing stays, like nothing sticks. And, you know, going back to like the revival of the 90s and the 2000s, and this generation of young people kind of latching onto it, because you kind of think, where has it gone from there, really? Like, what is new? There doesn't seem to be anything that's kind of new. But obviously with these, you know, trends and kind of this nostalgia, there's a darker side to it, I think. As in, you know, if you look at kind of the 90s and the 2000s, and particularly the shaping of women and the narrative around women and women against women and women's bodies, you know, when people are now going on Instagram and they're looking for fashion trends of the 2000s, they're being shown images of very, very thin women, because that was the ideal of the time. Now, I find that concerning. As a person that grew up through that era and navigated that era, which was very difficult, I find it very difficult now seeing all that imagery again. How do you feel about it?
Is it difficult for you because you were kind of on the receiving end of it in a way, that because you were in the public eye?
I think it was difficult for me in the sense that it was, we were all kind of led down a diet culture, kind of, right, counting calories, and every magazine was all about food and controlling food and all of that kind of thing, that as a young person, you develop kind of just, the conversation becomes all about food and all about kind of the way you look. Whereas fast forward, now I'm a woman in my 40s, I approach it so differently. Like, my attitude to food and to well-being is completely different to what it was back then. But I think it was because of how much we were being fed through culture and magazines and everything else. And when you see now all of those things coming back, you're like, oh, I hope that's not trendy again, because I really don't want to see any of that again. I'm kind of comfortable.
Yeah, one would hope that it has evolved and that it has picked up, that even by revisiting it when it exists now, it has picked up some of what's happened since. Because I distinctly remember, as well as the beauty pages, I would do the fashion shoots. So I would be up in Manchester and Liverpool, up and down on the trains every week doing, it was Coronation Street, Emmerdale, and there were some others, Hollyoaks, things like that. And I don't think there was a set that I ever went on where anyone really ate, and where we didn't talk about it, and where we weren't talking about what kind of clothes size that person was wearing. But I hope now shoots are slightly different. Like, even though we are picking up a little bit, I do think it has moved on. And hopefully what we see now is actually, we didn't stand a chance against the influence of diet culture. It was everywhere. And even as someone who was a fashion editor, I have to be really honest, who did I choose for shoots? It was just this unspoken thing of, and if somebody suddenly looked a bit more glamorous, or if somebody looked like they had dropped weight, that would be reason enough to pick up the phone to the press office and say, hey, do they want to do a shoot? So it was awful. It was awful. And I think the thing that's difficult for us perhaps is how complicit we were in something that we realized was really damaging.
I think as well, though, that again, the thing that concerns me, though, is for a younger generation, although I do think the younger women nowadays are so much more savvy, and they do have more open discussion, and they do challenge and they do push back. But I think, like with the rise in Ozempic, for example, that kind of dialogue has kind of freaked me out a bit, again, going, no, like, we're not doing this. Like, I don't want to see women or anyone kind of taking a fast drug that to achieve a beauty ideal, because we have moved so forward, haven't we, in terms of body diversity, and that is something that we should be celebrating. But it is hard when you're, I suppose, like when you have a platform to try and push back against things, and equally challenge things that where you think, oh, that could be unhealthy though. I was watching one of the podcasts that you did with a fantastic doctor, which was Binge Over Brain. She wrote that book.
Catherine Hansen, Brain Over Binge.
Right.
Yeah.
Brain Over Binge. And she was talking about how different bodies obviously need to be healthy in their own right. And it's very much, we do have to kind of keep pushing that, don't we, as opposed to slipping backwards.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I think, yes, I think the biggest thing is to connect with how you feel. That's I mean, I've been on my own body image journey, as any woman our kind of age probably has. But my thing was, I was really disconnected from my body. And so the progress have been able to make has been by listening to it, and not just sort of treating it like a dumpster fire. I'd throw anything into it food wise. I was of that generation as well. There was no money in media. I don't think there was any more either, but I lived on canapes and free booze. That didn't do me much good. I mean, it was great fun, but if I really had thought about, well, how does this food make me feel, or how does it make me feel when I don't exercise, or how do I feel when I exercise? I never asked myself those questions. I was like, how do I get into that size? Which is a very silly way of kind of looking after the machine in which you get to live in.
But I think as we mature, and again, as our bodies start to change, and it's great now, again, like with podcasts and different platforms, that we're able to have a bit more education around kind of our bodies, and particularly women in our 40s. We do have to think, okay, like you said, the machine, how am I going to fuel this through perimenopause and menopause, and how important it is to fuel our bodies. It's a great thing that we now have all this access, isn't it, to all this different information.
It's just, there's so much information out there, but again, it's a great thing and it's a bad thing. The best thing about the internet is that we have all the information at our fingertips. The worst thing about the internet is that we have all of the information at our fingertips. And I think what I've definitely noticed, particularly with the conversation around menopause. So a few years ago, I created loads of podcasts with doctors about perimenopause and menopause, really just really deep diving into those conversations that you wish you could have with your doctor, but let's just be honest, they don't have the time or resources to be able to really talk you through it. So trying to put those conversations on tape, so you could kind of, even if you knew nothing, you would come away from that understanding at the very least, like when your cycle starts, when it ends, what happens in between, how it might change, all of those sorts of things, right up to bioidentical hormones and the kind of the appropriate treatment for you should you be feeling X, Y, and Z symptom. And then what I've noticed happen is, particularly last year and sort of the year before, the conversation around menopause and perimenopause became much louder, lots more people talking about it. And then it felt like it got territorial. And it was like, if you thought this thing, then you hated the people who thought this thing. And if you believed in bioidentical hormones, then you must be angry with the people who believe in body identical hormones. And that, Natalie, is when it becomes really unhelpful, because the whole thing is about empowering women, right?
Absolutely.
And we're not empowering each other if we're arguing about who's right.
Absolutely. And also the thing is as well that really bothers me, and I kind of try and, speak about it as much as I can, is the commercialization of it as well.
Oh,
that really frustrates me, because everything, I don't know about you, but I get sent press releases like daily for different things. And so much of it being like, this cream's for menopause, this is for menopause, this is perimenopause. And I'm like, whoa, stop it. Like, you're just now trying to trick women, desperate women as well, may I add, like women who are really struggling with the varying symptoms. And now you're trying to give them a quick fix. And it's so infuriating, and we have to try and cut through, don't we? And which is what I love about your podcast, is that you do cut through the BS. You do go, right, okay, what about this? And this is this. And you, same as kind of what I'd like to do, is that bringing the experts in to say, right, okay, this is really good, trusted information, and you can trust this, because it's so important, isn't it? Especially when women are so vulnerable.
It's so important. And I do think the commercialization, you're absolutely completely correct. There are so many products now available, particularly in the beauty space, for women going through the menopause. And yet, if you really interrogate those formulations, nothing has changed. It's just marketeers have understood that menopausal women will spend their money, which their disposable income is probably higher than the most demographic age-wise. And so all this, it's like, it drives me absolutely mad. Everything is for the menopause now. You're absolutely right. And there's only one skincare range I've actually tried recently where I've thought, that's the only one I feel comfortable talking about, because I can actually see some benefits. A really beautiful range, actually specifically designed for the menopause, by Vichy, but it's really clever formulations. But one of the things I really love about it is the night cream. When you put it on, it's cooling. So you get into bed and you put it on, and you'll suddenly sort of feel this very pleasant chill on your skin. And I thought, now they've got me there, because that would be lovely if you are struggling with those hot flashes and you are feeling like you're constantly burning up. That to me is reason enough for me to mention that brand and that name and menopause in the same sentence, because I feel like there's actually something to be gained from that.
Absolutely. And this is again why people come to you, because of that trust, and because it's important that when we do have a platform, that we don't fall into that trap, and we do only discuss the products that either do genuinely work for us, or that you can see might work for a friend of yours, or somebody that you can say 100%, I promise you as an audience, that somebody that's following me, that I do have integrity, and this does really, really work. If we can just, move back to you personally. You obviously went freelance after your time at OK Magazine and worked for various different magazines. But I was reading another piece about you that said, when you were 37, 38, that actually was a very difficult time in your life, and how you kind of hit a place of rock bottom, but that you, by doing so, that's the best place to be, to kind of build back. And I just wanted to talk to you about that and say, what were the things that helped you kind of move back, and particularly before you turned 40 as well? How did you navigate that time?
probably quite inelegantly if you were looking at it in real time. I think I had always thought I was fighting a fight that no one else thought. And actually, I've talked about this a lot over the years. And it's kind of always felt in my head, it kind of felt like I've got to push through. Everything's a bit harder for me than it is for everybody else. And I don't know whether that kind of seed was born because I did have that really difficult, those sort of inelegant teenage years. And so I felt like people got it easier. But I guess I'm trying to rewrite that in my head because I just don't think that that's the reality. But in my head, I definitely felt like it was always a little bit harder for me, or I was always a bit poorer than all of my friends. I was always a bit less well put together. I just always felt like the runt of the litter, sort of socially and in work and everything like that. Even when I had landed my dream job, I felt undeserving of it in the weirdest of ways. And I think what happened when I was about 37 is every single part of my life was rubbish. And I went freelance, and it wasn't what I was expecting, but equally I hadn't really thought about what it should look like. I just thought that it would be fine, and it wasn't. So that was like, oh my God. Socially, I realized that because of how I was, and low self-esteem had meant that I'd always kind of been attracted to quite dominating personalities. And there was a part of me that sort of began to feel like I was being bullied even by the people closest to me. So there were sort of every part of my life, I just thought there's nowhere where I feel any joy. There's nothing. I don't feel good about any of it. How the hell did I get here? And I think the best thing was I spoke to a friend of mine, Marcia, who had been okay with me. I was there 9.5 years. She was there 8.5 years. And so we kind of grew up together, and we've still got those trauma bonds. We have the okay nightmares, and we call each other up. Did you hear the nightmare last night? Yeah, I did. But she's a really magnificent, brilliant, pragmatic woman, and she's one of those people who, if you're ever dilly-dallying, you just call Marcia, and she's very, very good. And I called her up practically hysterically crying, just saying, I don't know who I am anymore. I've completely lost. I remember what it used to be like walking into OK, giving the air of being confident, but I'm like, I don't know where she is. She's gone. And she said, okay, what you need to do is you need to step away from work. You need to take some time off, and you need to, like, this is bad. You need to ask for some help. And really, that was what it was. So it was actually accepting, yes, this is terrible. You feel depressed, you're highly anxious. And because I had been pushing it all to the side for such a long time, it had really built up. So I was really, by the time it kind of hit rock bottom, I did have a mental health assessment, and it was severe depression and severe anxiety with a sprinkling of OCD thrown in for good measure. And I started therapy, but also I just let go of everything. And that sounds really counterintuitive, but I was holding on to things so tightly and so desperately, like, it has to look like this. It has to be like this. And I just thought, just let go, because it hasn't ever looked the way that you want it to look, even when it's looked great. So just let go of it all and just start again. And I had absolutely no money. And I don't know how I survived that period financially. I mean, barely, just, thank goodness. But it was about admitting, yeah, I'm not happy and I want things to change. And I know that's not going to happen overnight. But if I can just believe that this time next year, I will feel better than I do today, then it's worth putting in the effort, even if it's only 1% better, because I feel so bad now.
Well, it's that thing of looking in the mirror, isn't it? And looking and staring at the ugly truth and just going, okay, I have to wipe the veneer off here and really look. And like you say, take accountability as well and go, you know, if you were saying before about blaming situations, blaming other things, kind of putting responsibility on other things. And we have to shift that focus back to ourselves. And I think it's a bit of a rite of passage for women going through their 30s to their 40s. It's, you know, that childish kind of, it's your fault, it's you, you did it, not me. And that rite of passage that, you know, you kind of go through that says, actually, what is my fault? What can I take ownership of? Because once you have the ownership, then you can do something about it. So that's important, isn't it?
Totally. And the thing is, it was all my fault. Because even though I could say, oh, I felt like I was bullied in friendships, like I was in those friendships. So I like all I can control is my part in it. And I I'm glad that you said that about, I think a lot of women go through it, because I think the mistake I made was thinking that this was just what was happening to me. And not because I was special in some way, but because I was such a loser that everyone else was avoiding these pitfalls. And it was just me who kept falling into them. Like, that's how badly I felt about myself. And I do think it's important to say that we're all sort of going through it in our own ways, which is why when I've talked about it before, I've thought, oh God, I think I thought it was, like I said, it was as though I was fighting constantly a battle with the world, but you couldn't see it from the outside because it really just did exist in my head. So again, need to be accountable for that and realize that actually this is a sort of global issue that loads of people encounter. It was not special to little old me.
but it's hard when it's in your head, and it's hard especially when you've gone through a period of anxiety or depression where things your brain is playing tricks on you, and you are being fooled into thinking certain things about yourself. To challenge that and to challenge those internal intrusive thoughts is a difficulty, and like you say, with therapy, that's kind of what it's there for, is to help you unpick that. But there was something else you said as well that was a piece of advice that you would give, which is you're on your own, kid. And I loved that because I love Taylor Swift, right? And I loved Swifty's new album. And there's that song where she said, "You're on your own, kid. You always have been." And whenever I have it on in the car, it properly makes me cry. I'm like, oh.
Well,
because it's so true.
One of my very best friends in the whole wide world is Lindsay Kelk, the best-selling author. And if you haven't got her books, you must read them. She's a very, very talented lady. And I went to Vegas with Lindsay. She lives in LA. We went to go and see Taylor Swift on the third night of the Eras tour. But when that album came out, which one was it now? Was it Midnight's came out? And it has that song on it, "You're on your own, kid." I've said that so much on the podcast. I rang Lindsay and I was like, I'm not even kidding. Do you did Taylor get this from me? And she was like, "No, Emma." But I just thought, that's the motto I came up with in therapy, which is, and it sounds really depressing, "You're on your own, kid." But actually I found it really empowering, because it meant that I just stopped spending energy on expecting external help or expecting somebody or expecting something to work in my favor. It's like, you've got to do it. You're on your own. You've got to figure this out. And actually, funnily enough, I was talking to Trinny Woodall the other day, and we were talking about knowing that you could take a risk because you've got something there to catch you. And she was talking about various other things. I was like, but you're the net. You're the thing that's going to catch you. And she was like, oh yeah, maybe. But I think it's really empowering to realize that I'm never going to let myself fall if I can help it, now that I know that I'm on my own, kid. But before, I think I was expecting some sort of magical buffer to always catch me. And one of the biggest shifts was, no, it's you. So you have to make sure you've got all of the skills, all of the things that you need, so that if you make that decision and do that thing, if it does go wrong, or if it doesn't go the way that you want, you're going to be there and you're going to be, "That's fine. Let's move on. You're the net. You're on your own, kid."
But honestly, I totally get that. And like I was saying, you bet on yourself, but you have to have confidence in the first place in yourself. So there's a lot of unpacking, a lot of work to do to kind of go, actually, I can survive, because as you said, you won't let yourself kind of go further. Do you know what I mean? When you've gone to rock bottom, you can't let yourself go further. So it's about building back and about going, well, you trust your own instincts. You start to trust your own decisions. You break away from, I know we've all got friends, but you kind of break away from the WhatsApp group that's like, "What do you think, everybody, what shall I do about this?" You start going, actually, as a maturing woman, I've got the information, I've got the wisdom, I can trust me. But again, it's such a messy journey to go through. But, the more we talk about it, the better.
It is a really messy journey. And I think the best thing is to tell people it's not linear. And sometimes you'll have really crappy days. But funnily enough, again, on the podcast recently, I was talking to Dr. Nicole LePera, the holistic psychologist, and she's been on the show before. And we've spoken a lot about mental health. And I was saying how I actually don't mind a bad day these days, even though they can sometimes take me by surprise. You can sort of wake up and you're sort of metaphorically speaking, you got out the wrong side of the bed. And even this morning, everything that I tried to do failed. So I got up, I was trying to schedule some content, my apps kept crashing. Then I put some under eye moisturizer things on, under eye patches to like lift and moisturize my under eye area. And one of them fell off and fell on the floor, and it was a really expensive eye patch. And I believe in the 5-second rule, but not when it comes to eye patches in the kitchen floor. And so I just was like, okay, stop. So I just put everything down and I sat down. I was like, I'm just going to have an espresso, take some deep breaths and move forward. And what I like is basically what I'm trying to say is that a bad day doesn't bother me now, because a bad day is just a bad day. I can regulate within that 24-hour period. And even if the dark thoughts seep in and they get me for a day, they don't get me for much longer. And if they ever do, if I ever think, I had a spell at the end of the summer when I was like, well, I can't shake this. This is bothering me. So I just kind of, I've got the tools now, because you have to build the emotional toolkit to be able to be the net for yourself and to catch yourself. But the great thing is being able to see it in the distance coming at you, because you can head it off. But when it's already on top of you, which is the sort of position I found myself in a few years ago, it takes a lot of strength to fight it off. And I think the one thing I would say is, I remember a friend saying to me, who I hadn't seen in a while, about, I don't know, a couple of months ago, she said, a few years ago, you used to come to things and you're always looking over my shoulder as if you were looking for someone better, or you always seem really distracted. And now it's like, you're just so easy breezy. And I said to her, if you knew the Herculean effort it had taken for me to come out that day, and I wasn't looking over your shoulder to see someone better, I was terrified. I was watching the door, because my nervous system constantly thought that it was under attack. I was really jumpy, and probably needed to like sleep for a day after I came out that time. It took so much effort. Now I'm standing in front of you, I'm on autopilot. Truth be told, like, it doesn't feel like that much of an effort. But when someone is really, really struggling and they still show up, you have to hand it to them, because on those really dark days, to get out of the house can feel like you are carrying the weight of another human being, a dead weight on your back. And then you turn up and throw a smile on at a party, or turn up at work and still perform. My God, you have to celebrate those people who are going through it and still manage.
Absolutely. And like you were saying before, sometimes, like, I've been really anxious in the past, which was one of the reasons I started my podcast, was to try and navigate with other people how to overcome that anxiety. And that used to be me. I'd have to go to events, or I'd have to show up on set. But the reason I did those things was because it was still intrinsic to who I was. And it was the last remaining little bit of me that's how I did it. Because I was like, if I don't do that, then I really don't know who I am anymore. It's my comfort blanket in a weird way. Do you think is that kind of the same thing for you, that because you've grown up in that world which was, glamorous, and you had to be there and you had to meet those deadlines?
I guess so. I think I'm also quite performance driven, and also I respond to other people's expectations. But I will go and do things if I think it will please other people, or if I think it will look a certain way to other people. And I think, again, for me, one of the things was sort of tuning into what I think is like my expectations, rather than constantly living by someone else's standards, which is what I was doing. What will they think of that, about this? What would they say about me? I was always asking the outside world for who I was, what I meant, what my value was. I never once asked myself until I really hit rock bottom. So yeah, I suppose it was something that, yeah, I thought there's also this quote I remember very distinctly during that period of time. RuPaul and Michelle Visage used to publish a podcast called What's the Tea? And I love that show so much. They don't do it anymore, but Ru has been through his own mental health issues, and so has Michelle. And Michelle's been on the podcast, actually, we've talked about it. And he said at one point there was something he said, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And I I couldn't even cry. It was one of the most shocking things that ever happened. I just had my earphones in. And he just said, we all have an internal saboteur, and the internal saboteur is trying to get you alone so it can kill you. And I realized I was slowly, particularly, and freelancing had allowed me to do this because I didn't have to go into an office all the time. I was slowly, very, very slowly absenting myself from life, spending much more time alone, not going out. And my saboteur was winning. And so, but what was the ultimate win? I wasn't going to let that happen. So I was like, right, we're going to push against this. But realizing that actually that whole kind of withdrawal, whilst on the one hand, it makes you feel really safe. Social withdrawal does make you feel really safe, but actually it's quite dangerous. So I that was when I thought, okay, this is actually, this is quite treacherous. This feels quite upsetting and bad. And I don't want to be isolated by an internal saboteur.
And that's the thing, is that the switch within you, the whatever it was, kind of to jolt you kind of forward, your own net, you're catching yourself before you've had that way to fall. You've kind of moved forward with it. And then, obviously from that time, you did build yourself back up, and then you've created this incredible podcast, which, is a global success. How has that been for you? How do you feel about that now? And do you feel kind of quite free? And do you feel, because I was going to ask you, what is the secret ingredient to podcasting from your point of view?
It's so interesting because, how long has Capsule been going? The Capsule been going?
4 years now.
4 years, yeah. So that's actually, mine's been going 7 this year. So I think that part of the secret sauce is timing. So you got in before a lot of people, I got in before a lot of people. And I think as well, in the beauty space, magazine beauty editors were sort of the queens for such a long time. Then all of a sudden we started hearing rumblings about people on YouTube and bloggers, and we were like, oh, we'll be fine. And of course, nothing will shake the foundations of print media. Well, I think you'll find that digital will, my friends. So I sort of was very aware for a while of people like my friends Sam and Nick, who started Pixie Wheel on YouTube, people like my friend Caroline Hirons, who has a prolific blog and YouTube. And before she's gone on to do the amazing things that she's doing now with her brand Skin Rocks. But so I was very aware of one of the secrets to their success, and their success has been incredible and very well deserved, was timing. And I was listening to podcasts when I was going through that really terrible time in my life. And I was channeling conversations. I was deliberately tuning into conversations with people who are successful, because Tim Ferriss says on his show, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now, as I've already said, I was socially withdrawing. So who am I going to spend time with? So I was spending time with Tim Ferriss and his incredible guests. And there's something to be said for that. I do think it sort of rubs off on you. And then when you start talking about things, some of their vocabulary comes out, or some of their thoughts and feelings have become your own. And so I thought, God, I'd really like to do that, because one of the things about freelancing is I never really, with OK, I got to interview people and I really, really enjoyed that. And the beauty pages were great fun to do, but I never really got to delve into beauty. I got to put pictures in, write the name of the product and the price, and with whatever character count was left, try and fit in something about the product. But you could never be fully accurate because you were so limited on what you could say, it just in terms of space. And so I'd never really built those muscles up of talking about beauty editorially in a way that I probably would have liked to, which is more like I'm a punter, I'm a consumer who has access to great information. And so that's what I wanted to kind of turn it into. And so the podcast was kind of born out of, how can I merge my two worlds, where one is I want to tap into successful people and successful conversations and be inspiring, but also talk about the beauty industry. So that's how it started, just interviewing founders, and then it's evolved from there. But I do think the secret sauce is timing. I think being ahead of the sort of big crowd, particularly in the UK, was really vital for me. But I think one of the things is that I'm very, very lucky in that a lot of people found me early on and have really stuck with me. And I'm so grateful for that. There are people who've been listening since day dot. And I was thinking this, the podcast is 8 in April 2024, which means that we're coming up for the podcast having run nearly as long as my longest job, which was at OK. And the idea of people sticking with me from episode 1 all the way to now and potentially to then actually gives me goosebumps.
But that's what I mean, is you should be so proud of that success and, that achievement. But do you think as well that part of that is because, well, you're enjoying it and you feel like you've the control element? As a podcaster myself, I love being able to discuss what I want to talk about. Like you said, really getting to delve into things and really being able to share proper information with people that you think really need it. Do you think that that's an element of it, is that because of your enjoyment, that the success of the longevity of it, that's part of it?
I hope so. I would hope so. I think I've also tried a lot on the show. Like I did a couple of year-long series about habits. So in 2018, I did a series called 26 Habits, where every 2 weeks I would make or break a habit. And it would be things like giving up coffee. Never. But like, what happens if you give up coffee for 2 weeks? Well, the main takeaway is you save quite a bit of money. And things like, what else did I do during those habits? Like, I had a complete wardrobe cleanse, where I did this thing where you have to whittle down your wardrobe to just 33 items. And that was game changing, because actually I never put back in the other things. I just sold them or donated them. So that was really fascinating. So all of these little things, I think things that we often think about, I wonder what would happen if I tried that, but then sort of the build up to it's too much effort. So the habit series have been really successful. And I sort of took that onto Instagram, and a couple of years ago I was like, I can't do a press up, I'm going to do a press up. So just every day I would just be like, I'm doing this version of a press up today. And then by, I think it was 8 weeks later, 7-8 weeks later, I was able to do a press up, and I can still do press ups to this day. So I like to think that, and people have said to me that the fact that they started with me, and even though I might not have been saying, hey guys, I'm really struggling and I can barely get out of bed, they have felt the journey of the confidence growing. And even on Instagram, for example, I don't know the right vocabulary to say this. I was about to say what I've always said, which is I've really struggled with my weight. I haven't struggled with my weight. I have been overweight for a really long time and now have lost weight. And that as well, that very visible change in me has elicited a lot of positive and negative response. So I do think perhaps that because there has been an obvious journey of my own, maybe
that's what people are tapping into.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know if you found this, I never thought I'd be as honest as I am as a podcaster. I was like, every week is like therapy. Like every different person that comes in, I either cry or I find something out. And I do think that this medium allows you to be more authentic and allows you to come across more as yourself. And if you've been, trying to live up to other people's expectations all the time, or being a people pleaser, this and gathering your own tribe that follows you just the way you are, is quite a freeing experience, isn't it?
Totally. And I completely agree with you. And actually, a couple of years ago, somebody said to me, I've listened to your podcast for ages. I also follow you on Instagram. They're two different people entirely. I was like, what?
Wow.
What do you mean? And she said, on the podcast, it's you. You are so honest. I don't think you hold back anything. On Instagram, you are much more reserved. You are nowhere near as honest. And it's true. It's absolutely true. You're completely right. You and I are having this conversation now. And whoever's listening to this with us, we're having a very private personal experience with you, because it's just the three of us.
Yeah.
Or whoever else might be in the car. I don't know. but it's just us. It's just us. And I think it's like, when you're just having a conversation with friends and someone's earwigging, the energy of the conversation changes a little bit because you've got an audience. I do think with podcasting, it's sort of the other way. It becomes even more personal. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think the amount of times I've had people on the podcast, particularly mental health professionals like psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, and halfway through I've had to go, not to make this my own personal therapy session, because it's so hard not to not to tap them up for something that's relevant to your own experience.
Well, it is hard, isn't it? Or like, I sit there kind of going, right, okay, I'll take this away with me. Okay, everybody, do you remember that bit? Because again, it allows you to kind of explore things personally. And I like what you were saying before about, starting a journey and then following it through. There's an accountability to it, going back to what we said earlier. And once you've set yourself like, okay, we're going to try this, whether it's a series or whether it's a challenge, you do have that accountability to then show up for your audience and to go through that with them. And I know that you've built an incredible forum as well that relates to the podcast, and have taken, some rough with some smooth commentary about whether it's about weight or, again, Ozempic or other things like that. But do you, were you prepared for that? Like to actually have to kind of answer those kind of questions? Or how does it make you feel when you might get negative comments?
This is such an interesting thing because of the intention with which I put out my content, I don't even consider somebody, particularly on the podcast, I don't consider a negative response. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit to sort of put this into context. So when I worked on the magazine, we worked a lot with people who we made cover stars, for example, or who were extremely famous. And so we put them on the cover every week. Whether we made them a cover star or not is like open to debate. But what would often happen with those people, particularly when they were being so open and they would do at homes, or they would do their weddings, and then they would do baby bump shoot, and then they do baby shoot, and then they do another baby bump shoot, and we were in their lives before reality TV really picked up, before social media. So it really was the sort of the main place where you would find out about these people, and they would ride this incredible wave of success. And I can think of two people in particular, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, who would be on the cover all the time and absolutely loved it, and then inevitably, and this isn't just characteristic of the British tabloid press, this is characteristic of all global media, but the UK get the brunt of the sort of criticism, is that the tide turns. It's like, we will let you enjoy your lovely engagement and your marriage and everything, but we are sorry, it's time for you to be torn down. And there were a couple of people who reacted to it very, very badly, in that they started to sort of almost pick a fight with the press. They would almost pick a fight with the people who were criticizing them, and they would do things to get a response, or they would say things to try. And it was a bit like when you see playground bullying and you see the person who gets bullied and they try and fight back, and you're like, oh, just walk away, just walk away. The best way to make this end is to walk away. So I think why that relates to my social media is that because of the intention with which I put out my content, it didn't occur to me necessarily that somebody, particularly when it's really raw and honest, that somebody would say something negative. But what I've definitely noticed is that you have to be really careful how you respond, because the instinct is to do what those cover stars, some of those cover stars did, which is to start getting gnarly, or to start pushing back. And actually, and I have done that a couple of times in the early days, you sort of think, screw you. Like, or you try to explain to them how they've missed the point, or you try to explain to them what your real intention was, or perhaps they could look at it from this perspective. And I don't know if you've had this, Natalie, but I think the best thing is just to kind of leave them to it, because they have taken a position of wanting to disagree with you, and that probably feels quite good for them, and you're not going to get them to see your point of view. So why engage? But then that becomes really difficult, because you do want to engage with people, but I think you have to sort of make a judgment call and just say, you're entitled to your opinion. I wind you up. I bother you. Some people you look at, let's face it, you just think, I don't like. You take one look at them and you don't like them. Maybe that's what's happened here, in which case I will take myself out of this dynamic. And if they want to continue, fine, I'll mute them or restrict them or whatever. But it is funny. And when people sort of say things like that I'm on Ozempic, which I'm categorically not. I've overcome an eating disorder, and I work very, very hard every day to not slip back into old habits. I just sort of laugh and think, well, I know it would make you feel better if my weight loss success, just sort of being very superficial about it, for some reason it would make you feel better if I hadn't earned it.
Yeah.
And that's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
I do think that that's completely that is the way that I look at things. Is I've been very fortunate not to have a lot of negativity, but again, I think it's because I've never engaged with it. So I think when you do engage, the people that are going to gun for you see that, and then they do things to try and trigger you to respond. So when I have had negative comments on my feed, I haven't responded, because I think I did once many, many, many years ago. I think it was even right at the start of like my Instagram kind of journey, and it was when my little boy was quite little, and you know, as a mum, you want to defend yourself, but then I quickly learned that those people saw that they got attention, and that kind of made other people go, well, if I do that and I slam then I'll get a response. So I just thought, you know what, actually, and I've been very lucky, you know, I came through kind of from kids TV and then into ITV, and you get schooled in kind of how to kind of deal with the media and deal with people, and I just thought the best thing for me to do, as you said, is just to step away from it and go, well, actually, this is your fight, it's not really mine. I'm just going to just step back and you'll make your own conclusion about me. I'm just going to keep doing what I need to do, because as you say, otherwise it becomes a tirade, and it also kind of encourages other people to jump on a bandwagon. And if you react badly, like I know the kinds of people that you were talking about earlier, it ends up getting worse, and then you get more negativity, and it just perpetuates then. So yeah, I think it's a difficult one to navigate though, isn't it? And especially when you're trying to do something good, when you're trying to like share information or just be honest, and you know, you kind of get beaten down for it. It is very difficult to do that. But again, moving kind of towards your go-tos for wellness and your favourite beauty products, what would you say right now are the things that you turn to and that you go, yeah, 100%, I would recommend that to everyone?
Let me think. Well, the CeraVe gel cleanser is the greatest cleanser, potentially one of the greatest cleansers of all time, because A, it's affordable, B, it's in a pump action, which is my favorite kind of, I can't, like, Caroline has launched an amazing cleanser in her Skinworks cleanser, but I have already said to her, please just put it into a 1 litre pump action. It is so good. But I like really functional things in the bathroom. I also like things that are inexpensive but do the job. And for me, CeraVe is just so simple, does the job. And I think it's like $12.99 for 500 ml. And so it lasts for ages. And then if you do like 3 squirts instead of 2, you don't feel like you're being extravagant.
You're like, oh God.
There's nothing worse. And I think as someone who's been a beauty writer for a really long time now, your perception of the value of juice in these products gets warped, because I'm not going into the shop and spending my hard-earned money on it. And I always come back to that. And I always come back to, would I spend my own money on this? Because if I wouldn't, I've got no business talking about it. That's sort of my benchmark. And I do think that there are so many incredible products out there now that are so affordable. For example, my nighttime skincare has been for the last 3 years. Obviously I test things, so I will go through periods where I'm testing things. But the thing that I always come back to is Skin and Me. It's £19.99 per month. You send in pictures, they assess it as a team of dermatologists, and they've got people who dispense the product. So they assess your pictures based on your needs and wants. Then they put together a specific formulation for you, and it comes to you in the post. And it's an eco-friendly delivery system. It fits through any letterbox, and it's so inexpensive. And my God, my skin has changed. And considering I started using it in my early 40s, my skin is in great nick. Was very lucky. I had a facial with Michaela Boulder the other day. # the Boulder method. I don't know if you know who Michaela is. Michaela does the most incredible facial massages, but it's sort of simultaneously painful and wonderful and almost transcendental at the same time, because she massages cranial muscles. She will go in at your jaw muscles. She gets right in under your cheek fat and under the eyebrows. And there are all these pockets that you don't realize, because it's your face. They are full of tension. And then she starts manipulating them, and you're like, oh, she's like, don't fight me. I filmed it. And there's a bit where she's working on my chest, top of my chest. And I'd done chest day like 2 days before, and on the video I could just see her go, "Don't fight me," and she's just pushing as hard as she can. But it was singularly one of the best experiences I've ever had. And she said to me, when she was looking at my skin, she said, "Your skin is in great nick. What are you using?" And I thought, well, I know that it has responded very, very well to that prescription level skincare that's in Skin in Me. And it's £20 a month. Dose, you don't have to worry about dosage. It's just one click. You know exactly what you're using. There's no waste. I just think that for me is genius.
And it's such an investment as well, your skin. Like, it's such an investment. Years and years ago when I worked on the beauty counters, I always used to think, these creams, it could be like 30 pence a day or something. And, when you actually break it down. And if you've got great skin, then you don't need loads of makeup. You don't need kind of loads of anything on your skin, because really that will glow. And, as you just said, then I was looking at your skin going, God, her skin's amazing. Like, I was like, she hadn't got a ring light or anything on her. She looks incredible. So
what
I'm going to do
counters
that
did you work on?
I worked for Lancome and I worked for Chanel.
Okay. Which one do you love more? Do you have a favorite out of Lancome and Chanel?
I do love Chanel. My mum still works for Chanel. Yeah. So my mum is one of the top kind of managers up here in the north. She does a very good job, bless her.
Okay. Okay. So what's your favorite Chanel product?
Oh, God. I'm using, which is expensive, but it was a gift from my mum, the Sublimage Le Creme, kind of the yeah. And it is amazing. I love that. And I love as well the cleanser as well, the Hydra Beauty cleanser. I love that.
Do you know, I've never used the Chanel skincare. I've always just gone to them for makeup. I've never, so for me, Soleil de Tan, absolutely beautiful product.
Yes.
But I don't know. I still have this thing of, because I wouldn't go and buy it, because I don't ever use it. I always, when I used to get the really expensive stuff into the magazine, I just give them to the other team members, like the other feature writers. I'd be like, "Oh, do you want the Chanel stuff?" I'd always feel a little bit like, I can't use that because it's too nice.
Well, the thing is I never used to use it, and now I've got older, I'm like, Mum, I need that stuff. So my mum's very good, bless her. She kind of helps me out a bit, because no, you're right, it is very expensive, but I will give it to them. It does work, and I do really, really love it. And for me personally, I found it has changed my skin. Like, I've been getting quite a lot of pigmentation, and the cream has definitely like eased that out an awful lot, more than anything else I've ever used. But yeah, and then I'm a big fragrance fan, so I've always loved their fragrances, so that's one of my key things as well.
I have two supplementary questions. So first is favorite Lancome product?
It's
going to be a mascara, isn't it?
I was going to say it's either the mascara, but there's a lipstick, but I can't remember the number of it, but it's like a rose coloured lipstick, and it's a kind of it's not matte, it's a semi-matte kind of, what's it? It's like, I can't remember what it is now, but I remember when it was launched years and years and years ago. It was launched in the same year as the Juicy Tubes, because that was the same time that I was working for them.
Was that 90s?
Like 97, 98 or something. Yeah.
Juicy Tubes are making a comeback.
I know, it's hilarious. But like, I had one. I'd gone and got some stuff and got, like, when you get like a gift bag because you've shopped somewhere and you get a bit of everything. And I had this Juicy Tube, and I was like, oh my God, and I gave it to my niece. I was like, I used to have this. You'll love this. She's like, wow, these are on TikTok.
Wait until your hair gets caught in it.
Yes. Oh my God. And you can't. Like, and
there was another supplement. Oh yes, what SPF are you wearing? Because if you've got pigmentation, SPF 50.
Yeah, no, 50 all the time. Yeah. I have to, otherwise my skin would burn anyway. But 50, yeah. I love this. This has now turned into like a different kind of chat.
I'm all for it.
What was one of your favourite lipsticks? Because I saw that you've been looking at lots of different lipsticks recently, like the Black Honey, and there's been a few others, and I was laughing at the just me and my friend the other day at the Rimmel Heather Shimmer, and we were just going down that kind of road of like, what were our favourite products? What were your favourite products like when you were growing up?
Well, again, so my sort of teenage products were all problem solvers, because my skin was so bad. And actually I used to wear my mum's foundation, and I'm mixed race and my mother is not. so I was always wearing very pale foundations, and she, I think, pretty much exclusively wore number 7, because back in the 80s and 90s, number 7 was great makeup that was really
Yeah.
accessible compared to everything else. But I think it's funny, that series with the lipsticks, because I had lunch with the PR for Rimmel, and we were talking about how perception of brands changes over time. So if you remember Rimmel a few years ago, they had Kate Moss as an ambassador.
Yeah.
She did all the adverts, and it was like Rimmel London. They had Georgia May Jagger, and it was kind of achingly cool. And then I guess I've aged out of the Rimmel demographic by a huge amount, because they've now signed Maya Jama. Is that
Yeah.
see? I don't even know how to say her name, because I'm that old now and irrelevant that the people who are currently hip or whatever, I just wouldn't recognize. And I said, "Oh God, I really think you should lean into the nostalgia of Rimmel, because I remember those 99p lipsticks
Yes.
that you had to push up with the little knobble.
The click. The click.
That was how you got Heather Shimmer, because it was a tiny little thing, and the packaging would crack in your school bag, but you would be able to push this little lipstick up and get like a good amount of Heather Shimmer. But then I think it was $4.99 for the middle size, and then it was like $5.99 or $6.99 for the one with the like silver ring in the middle, like the proper lipstick. And I said, look, I'm going to come. We had Joe and the Juice spicy tuna right by their offices. And I said, look, I'm just going to come up and I'm going to go into the cupboard, which is one of the greatest places you can go with any brand. It's like, I'm going into the cupboard, because they also, Coty, who own Rimmel, also look after Kylie. So I was like, right, I am in. You cannot get rid of me. So I finally left with a Kylie lip kit. And I said, but I went into the Rimmel drawer and I took Heather Shimmer, Coffee Shimmer, and Amethyst Shimmer. And I said, I'm just going to do a fun thing on Instagram and let's see what happens. Well, it is the post that I have put the least amount of thought into in my 10 plus years on social media. It is the most watched thing I have ever done. It's had over 500,000 views on TikTok.
I love
and it has
it.
had over 250,000 on Instagram. And all it is me at the beginning with my hand over my mouth saying, you will be able to tell if you're a child of the 90s, you will know the second I remove my hand what lipstick I am wearing. And then I take my hand away, and the comments, the engagement, everything. So I was like, right, so that's how social media works. The least amount of time and effort you put into a post, the best engagement you get.
And that's what you do. But it is just that nostalgia though, isn't it? I mean, I was looking at a picture the other day there, and it was quite a recent picture, and I realised my lip line was really dark, and I was like, oh wow, am I doing that again now? Am I doing the brown lip liner and the slightly, kind of more filled in lip? And then for years, remember we did that thing where we put concealer all across our lips to make our lips look bigger, and then it was all brown eyeshadow on the years of like The Craft, and Neve Campbell was in Scream, and they all wore dark lip, like that dark brown kind of, the 90s. But it's the nostalgia of it. It makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Well, it's MAC Spice lip liner. Everybody wanted MAC Spice lip liner, but there's an incredible makeup artist on Instagram called she's on Instagram and TikTok, called Erin Parsons, and what she does is she sources discontinued makeup, or she finds vintage makeup. Her feed is absolutely phenomenal. And I tried Spice recently, and I was like, this is like orangey. And I always thought Spice was quite cool in more ways than one, but cool toned. And she did this brilliant post where she said, I found it. This is the packaging from the 90s. This is MAC Spice. This is an original. And this is current day. Let's test them together. And the formulation has changed. The color is fundamentally different. The new version of Spice is warmer, and the original version is a much cooler, almost gray toned brown. So I was like, got on the keyboard to MAC. I was like, I think you should bring back the old formulation and you should call it Old Spice.
Oh, that is very good. Yes, I would love that. And then the Spice Girls should get together and they should market it, and that would be massive.
Just all the spices, just bring all the spices together, but I do think there is something so nostalgic. And I would also say Heather Shimmer is definitely a different color. I remember it being much more silvery.
Yeah.
It is quite aggressively purple now. And so I would, if you go and look at that post and I take my hand away, if you remember Heather Shimmer as being quite a sort of silvery hint of purple, no, it is I was just going to see if it's in my drawer in front of me. It's not. It is a bombastic purple now with a silver sort of sheen.
that would not have worked in the Two Becomes
No.
One video. No, it would not, with, you know, your pigtails and whatever else and that nice 90s kind of lighting. It would have been different.
Just basically, it was all arc lights, wasn't it? It was just bleach everyone out, wash everyone out. Every single photo shoot was just like, let's just put so much light on the people that you can't see their noses.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. But I remember looking at pictures going, oh, wow, I look really good. Like, look at me, look at my skin.
So flawless.
Oh, Emma, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you today. Honestly, I feel like we've gone down memory lane and we've had our little group therapy, and it's been such a fantastic chat.
Same time next week?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's definitely do this again. Thank you, though. Thank you for your time.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. It's really lovely to chat to you.
And thank you guys at home for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope, you need to send in and tell us all about your greatest memories of your nostalgic makeup or memories of the 90s. Get involved and come and chat with us. You can find Emma on her Instagram at Emma Guns, or stream and download her brilliant podcast, The Emma Guns Show, on YouTube, Apple and Spotify. For more wellbeing and lifestyle, you can visit us at our website, www.capsule.co.uk, where you can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by streaming from any of our podcast channels and YouTube. As always, please do feel free to leave your rates and reviews. I would love to hear from you as this series goes on. You can also drop us a message at our Instagram at officialcapsule if you'd like to put any questions to our future guests or leave any messages about any previous or current episodes. I'll be back next week with another very special guest, so all that's left for us to say today is goodbye. So goodbye, Emma.
Goodbye. Thanks for having me.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.